Arc Titan Heart of Inmost Light build was one of the most popular setups for a long time, and it was for good reason. The ability looping mechanic was both addictive and powerful. But then with a little nerf here and a little nerf there, it started to trend down towards what many people considered a nail in the coffin when Lightfall's release hit the exotic chess piece really hard. But the new mod system introduced with Lightfall actually made it kind of ridiculous now. So I'm going to show you how to get infinite orbs, an average of 1100% faster grenade regen. You'll get 500% faster super regen, 100% more damage being applied twice as often throughout your entire activity, and all of this with a healing loop on command. See, I've been sitting in my basement testing countless mod stacking scenarios to find those perfect sweet spots of efficiency, all in order to find the exact setup that completely revives that build that was so damn fun. You end up with a ton of buffs going on with this build, either at the same time or in a specific sequence, whether it's ionic traces, making use of Jolt, being amplified, the 15 different types of mods that I'm going to run through, the Heart of Inmost Light exotic, otherwise known as Hoil, elemental impacts, and then some perks that'll even bring it to a brand new level. Now, to break down how the build works and what mods or fragments you're going to be using, I'm going to walk you step by step through the loop, which is essentially creating orbs, picking them up, then throwing your grenade, getting massive super boosts, using your thruster and your melee, and then healing. All of which has Hoil being the glue in the middle. And real quick, for those that don't know how Hoil works, in the simplest terms possible, it's just an exotic where using one ability will empower the other two. It makes them deal more damage and charge way faster. The empowerment will last 5 seconds, but you can actually reset that timer with a second stronger stack. So right here, you can see I use my thruster, which is my class ability, and it empowers my grenade and melee. Now, starting at the top of the loop, you're going to have 4 methods of generating orbs. First is the siphon mod of your choice, where getting 2 rapid kills of that element is going to spawn you an orb. At the end of the video, I'm actually going to explain how you can sometimes run 2 of these, but we'll save that for later. The second method is going to be having the Reaper mod on your Titan mark, where getting any kill simply after using your class ability is also going to spawn an orb. I thruster here, get a kill, boom, there's my orb. Number 3 is the fact that you're going to have the Spark of Amplitude fragment on, which also spawns an orb every 2 rapid kills while you're amplified. To become amplified is super easy too, because all it has to be is an arc kill, which you're going to be on your arc subclass. So a grenade kill, a melee kill, and even an arc weapon will do it too. It scales with the type of enemy, so here I just get 4 basic kills on a thrall and bam, I'm amplified. But it would only require 2 kills on something like an elite and only 1 on a mini boss like a yellow bar. Finally, we have the 4th method, which is thanks to running firepower on your gauntlets, because grenade kills will also spawn orbs, and that is the heart of this entire build. Next up is when you pick up those orbs, which we'll call section 2 of the video, and it's really cool because I've actually got a built-in loop protection, meaning it doesn't matter when you pick those up throughout your gameplay, it's going to benefit you. First and foremost, when you pick up an orb, you're going to get an armor charge in the game. It shows up on the left-hand side, and normally 1 orb gives you 1 armor charge, but because your boots are going to have the stacks on stack mod on them, you're going to actually get 2 charges per orb. And since you're often making more than 1 orb at a time, you're going to want at least 4 armor charges to be efficient. See, at base, that armor charge thing shows you 6 little checkboxes, so to speak, that you can fill up, but there's actually a cap of 3. So even if you picked up 10 orbs, it would only fill up 3 of them. And that's why we want to use stacks on stacks to bump that cap up to 4 to give you better efficiency with how often you create 2 orbs. Now, the first half of the loop protection is the fact that you're going to be using a grenade kickstart mod on your gauntlets. What this does is that when you throw your grenade, it's just going to give you a bunch of grenade energy back. It reads that you gain the energy for each stack of armor charge. And suddenly I thought, oh God, there's like 18 scenarios because there's 3 kickstart mods and 6 different amounts of armor charges. Well, it turns out there isn't some special stack multiplier mechanic going on between the mods and the charges. They just add up together like equal units. Say you have 1 kickstart and 2 armor charges. Think of that as just like 3 stacks. Now take a different scenario where you have 2 kickstarts but only 1 armor charge. That looks different, but it'll actually give you the exact same amount of grenade energy back when you throw it. It's still just a total of 3 units or stacks if you prefer. And what that means is the maximum stack you could possibly have is all 3 kickstart mods plus all 6 armor charges, which is a total of 9 units. That just so happens to give exactly 50% of your grenade back. So here's a table that you can screenshot if you want, where it just shows how much grenade energy you're going to get back depending on your unit count. I want to say thanks to the folks I worked with in the Massive Breakdowns Discord to get all this info. And what's really important is this graph on screen, because it helps find that perfect sweet spot that I talked about earlier. The orange bars are the percentage of that grenade energy box that you're going to get back when you throw your nade. I mentioned that 9 stacks is going to give you 50%, right? So that's how this graph works. And it's worth noting that when you have 0 armor charges and just one kickstart mod like this, your initial amount is actually going to be 12.5%. Now the green line is what I like to look at because that's how much benefit you're going to get from adding one more stack. For example, let's say I wanted to go from 2 to 3. Well, the jump from here to there is actually pretty good, and that's what the green line shows you. That's a 36, maybe 37% jump. But as many of you know, there's diminishing returns when you stack things. So as you can see, it starts to really go downhill for how efficient that is. When you look at the jump from here to here, it's pretty small. From 8 to 9 is like an extra 2.5% to your grenade box, which to me just isn't worth it. So my final conclusion was that your sweet spot is right around 5. I like the jump from 4 to 5 still. I think it's very much worth it. But after 5, your build definitely has better things that can be done. Because this build does hit 4 charges really often, we're going to be using 1 kickstart on the gauntlets, saving room for the other 2 mod slots. And remember how I said there's built-in loot protection with this whole thing? Well, what happens if you don't have your grenade when you walk over these orbs? The good news is that the armor charges still get picked up and just sit there waiting for the next time you're ready to throw. Because we're using the innervation mod on your boots, every time you do pick up an orb, it's also going to fill your grenade box by 10% each. And this means that this section is helping your build out regardless of the state of your grenade. Which brings us to part number 3, when you actually throw it. It needs to be the pulse grenade, and a ton of things are going to happen all at once. Obviously, the Kickstart mod activates, like I just told you, giving you 42% of that box back right out the gate. Number 2 is the fact that Hoyle goes off. Remember, when you do one thing, the other 2 get empowered. And number 3 is a ton of things that the actual grenade does to your enemies. So first is activating a bolstering detonation mod on your arms, which allows grenade damage to give you class energy back. Second is the fact that it's gonna kill an enemy and make you amplified, and remember, kills while amplified spawn more orbs thanks to Spark of Amplitude. Number 3 is that it'll be jolting enemies thanks to you wearing the Spark of Shock fragment, which emits chain lightning to all of those enemies around it for extra damage, and it'll even stun overload champions. Fourth is that you're going to be using the Touch of Thunder aspect, where dealing damage with a pulse grenade specifically will create ionic traces and heat seek back to you. And what do those traces do when they come back to your Guardian? Well, each one of them will actually give you 12.5% of all of your abilities back. We're still not done either, because number 5 is that firepower mod that I mentioned earlier. It's going to give you an orb of power too when you get these kills. And since there's so much benefit from one grenade, we tack on the Spark of Magnitude fragment to give you 8 pulses instead of the base 6 on pulse grenades. Which leads us to section number 4, which is all about your super bar, because you know you're going to be rocking Thunder Crash. You'll be using 1 Ashes to Assets mod on the helmet, which gives you around 450 to 500% more super than a base kill. It's a bit more complicated because you do get different amounts based on the enemy you kill, like say a regular thrall isn't going to give you the same amount that a yellow bar or a champion is, right? But I did want to talk about the stacking situation because it's pretty harsh when it comes to Ashes to Assets. So to make it clear, let's just say when you get a regular grenade kill in the game, you're going to get 10 units of your super bar, okay? While having just 1 Ashes mod on your helmet is going to give you 55 units or 450% more super from that same singular kill. If you were to put on 2 mods before you got that grenade kill, it would give you around 65 units of that super bar or 550% more. And if you toss on a third one, it would give you 70 instead of the 10, which is around 600% more. At the end of the video, I'll talk about some options where you can run 2 if you really want. But we're going to move on to section 5 and 6 and talk about the thruster and melee at the same time, because it really doesn't matter what order you're going to be using them in. When you're on this build, the reality is you're blitzing through crowds, spamming it all anyways, so don't worry too much about the order. Just from a technical sense, after the nade gets thrown, you're going to want a melee or thruster at some point, which, by the way, I did say thruster, not barricade, because the cooldown on thruster is much faster. And when you do this, you're going to activate 4 things. So starting with the thruster, the Reaper mod is going to activate prepping your next orb. Second is the Bomber mod on your class item, which is going to give you 12% of your grenade back, and then a distribution mod in that 3rd slot of your class item, because after some tests, it's actually better than a 2nd stacked bomber. See, distribution only gives roughly 4% to your grenade compared to that 12 I just showed you on bomber, but the 2nd stack of bomber that's diminished also only gives 4%, so they're actually equal. The catch is that distribution costs 3 affinity, whereas bomber only costs 1. This kind of makes sense because on top of the 4% to your grenade from distribution, it's also giving it to your other abilities, kind of like how Hoyle works. The one change I make if I'm running solo in like endgame content, which I'll discuss at the end, I sometimes swap distribution out with empowered finish. But the other half of this section is every Titan main's favorite, the melee. You can technically use shoulder charge or the falcon punch, but I like shoulder charge personally because it's super fun movement wise, and if there's an unstoppable champion in the activity, this will actually stun them through its intrinsic blinding. Now, staying on the topic of shoulder charge is that you're going to be running the knockout aspect, which will heal you every time you get a melee kill. Knockout doesn't require the melee to be a shoulder charge kill either, by the way. You can do it with just the base melee. So when you combine that with one more mod on your build called recuperation on the boots, every time you pick up an orb, it's going to grant you 70 HP. What this does is it makes you extremely difficult to kill because you have orbs all the time that are giving you 70 HP a pop. You have melee kills on command when you need to get your health back immediately. And then your fourth and final fragment is Spark of Resistance, taking 25% less damage when you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies. For weapons, this build is really fun because you can kind of run whatever you want. Like, take a look at your activity and use whatever you think you need, whether it's the rotating surge damage, the specific enemy shields, maybe it's the seasonal champ requirements, whatever you want. But I did want to add 2 more layers of fun if you want, and that's the fact that I mentioned arc weapons earlier on that'll help you become amplified, and then pairing that with a demolitionist perk if you can will make this entire build beyond crack. Take the new iterative loop arc fusion, for example, that just released with Lightfall. You can craft it with enhanced demolitionist, and it blew my mind how much it gives you back. So here's an example of how fast I can refill my grenade with the regular demolitionist shotgun. It's pretty amazing. But now I want to show you the same clip with the iterative loop using enhanced demolitionist. When it comes to swappables, I thought I'd lay out a couple build diagrams. So here's my setup if I'm running solo or if I'm on a team. The only difference is that when I'm on a team, I do actually toss that second kickstart mod on the gauntlets instead of firepower because there's just so many orbs everywhere anyways. And then like I said a moment ago, I'll use empowered finish if I'm on like solo endgame content, but if I'm running with a team, I'll just toss distribution on instead. And if it's a super easy activity, I might not care about that recuperation mod to help me get more healing because of how strong knockout is already. Just toss on a second innervation mod to just keep that grenade looping even faster. I think the only other spots to mention are having room for 2 resist mods on your chest piece depending on the activity, and then that third slot on your helmet. Feel free to run something like a heavy ammo finder or maybe even another siphon mod if you're running double special because that'll spawn more heavy throughout the activity anyways. Now this final piece is pretty important because I did want to future-proof this build outside of the current season. So right now in the artifact you can use whatever you want in column 1, just make sure that you have the authorized grenades one in column 2 because here's a list of how much cheaper each mod gets when you have this thing intrinsically applied to your season. Column 3, I dig volatile flow for void weapons. Shatter orbs is okay. Column 4, I'd say bricks and beyond is really good for void weapons. And then column 5, whatever you want, honestly. But again, maybe void channeling, that's really nice for a void weapon. And the future proofing is the fact that the new artifact probably won't have that authorized grenade mod, right? So this is what your builds are going to want to be after this season is over. Right, and I almost forgot. The last thing to mention is that you want really high resilience and discipline. Try to get 100 and 100 or as close to that as possible. The third priority would be your strength, then your intellect, then recovery, and finally mobility at the bottom. So I've ordered these from top to bottom in terms of priority with my actual stat splits on my personal build. I've given you a dim loadout link in the description if you want, but you still have to find your stat splits on your own armor, which can easily be done using Dim's loadout optimizer or even the D2 armor picker website if you're unfamiliar with that. And Dado actually just made a solid video showing you how to do that, so instead of linking something that I have, here's his. All I ask is that if you found this helpful, next time you see a video from me on your YouTube feed, give it a shot. Thanks.